Um, so what Joe and MCPA asked me to do is talk a little bit about what Carmine was alluding to, DHS, what we do, how we do it. So this is a quick and dirty NKIC 101, and what I'd like you to do is stop me if you got questions, and I'll be happy to try to answer them. And if you think I'm full of beans, then don't be afraid to say that either. So we have one major mission in the NKIC, and that is to get our arms around what's going on in the federal government and in critical infrastructure with respect to cyber incidents, cyber response. We try to be as proactive as we can, reduce the likelihood, and we do that a lot through developing relationships with some of our partners and predominantly information sharing. So there's three major muscle movers, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But the other part of this that I want to talk about is security and resilience of the nation's critical infrastructure. And we're partnered with DoD in a big way as we do that, particularly TJ White and Cyber Mission Force. We have a regular dialogue, and we're starting to work on common operating methodologies. Not as surprising as you would think that we tend to have sort of divergent methodology, but if you take a look at all five services, they all do it a little bit differently too. So what we're trying to do is be more closely aligned with them. And then when the nation, God forbid, has a really bad day and we have to respond, that we respond in a way that is consistent and we all know what each other's doing. And by the way, talking to each other in the same sort of language. And if you guys have DoD experience know, what they say in the Army doesn't necessarily translate in the Navy. Well, that's magnified by a lot when you consider you're talking to critical infrastructure partners that have no clue what the government speak is all about. So we try to act as a translator in that mix and make sure that we're being as well prepared as we can. So this slide has six sort of core functions on it. And they all fall into three major muscle movers. Number one is information sharing, and that's the critical part of what we do. Well, our objectives are to share information fast, share information that's actionable, and share it at an unclassified level. And if you stop and think about it, even in the government, there are plenty of people that don't have a clearance, so it's really, really hard to share information at a classified level. So the intelligence community, in particular, the folks up north of the river, have been really good at getting things down to an unclassified level so we can share it in an effective way. The second major muscle mover that fits into this group is analysis. How do you share information if you can't develop information that's worth sharing? So the analysis piece fits into that. And then the last piece is incident management, and that's everything from really sort of low-end automated cyber hygiene scanning, and we have 620-something customers that we provide that service for, to red team, blue team efforts to hunt on your network. We engaged in 2 hunts this week, one in a critical infrastructure partner and one in a federal government partner. And then when boom happens, what do you do for response when things blow up? And our folks are in position to be able to do those effective responses in conjunction with the partner that we're working with. And in a lot of cases, we partner with the FireEyes and the Mandians and the Symantec's and those players, CrowdStrikes, that are doing incident response. So there's a lot of crosstalk and a lot of sharing of information there too. So information sharing is number one. And I'm going to reiterate this: fast, actionable, unclassified. That's really important to us. Where's all that information come from? Our piece of the pie, if you will, is federal agencies, law enforcement, and the intelligence community that share information with us. But if you stop and think about it, that's only one small piece of the pie. How do we get some of our private sector partners to share with us more effectively? They have to trust us. If we don't develop sort of a trusting relationship with some of these partners, then they won't share with us. In fact, they won't even tell us when they have an incident. And then there are even cases inside the federal government where the departments and agencies have some reluctance about telling us what's going on. And all you got to do is look in the paper the last week, and SEC is in that box. The second line on the slide is operational planning, training, and exercise. So two parts right now we're really quite good at. Training, and training in a really small slice of the pie at the moment. Control systems. We have a schoolhouse in Idaho Falls, and we're doing a lot of DoD training out there now because DoD has recognized that there are control systems all over the place that they own, that they're responsible for, and if they crash, they're going to have a really bad day. So that schoolhouse in Idaho Falls is a hands-on, collaborative, interagency, interpartner effort to do high-end control systems training, and it's been quite effective. We build upon the expertise that lives in Idaho in terms of control systems. There are 20 or so folks within the NCIC that are as good as anybody in the world at understanding control systems, how they work, how to analyze them, how to understand what's going right and wrong in those systems. And so if you think about what they do at Idaho National Labs, we dovetail with their expertise. They're testing water systems, electric systems, automobile systems, understanding control systems across the board. We pull from that talent base so that when a nuclear power company in Kansas has a cyber incident, we can go and talk to them with some authority and understanding about what the heck is going on in their networks. The other part of it that I'll mention is exercises. So there is a national level exercise called Cyberstorm. It happens every 2 years. Part of our staff sets up and manages that exercise, but we do that national level exercise all the way down to exercises with local sheriff office, city council, municipalities. In fact, last year we were in Paducah, Kentucky, for example. There was an exercise with their municipal government and the mayor and the city council. What are they going to do in Paducah if they're having cyber incident going on there? How do they respond? What do they do? Who goes where? Who does what to whom? All those kinds of things. They apply across the board, from something major to something down at the local level. And so the exercise mob that we have does that. Part of what they do is learning and developing relationships with these people that they deliver exercises to. And that information flows back up into our information sharing effort, because now we know you. Now you start to trust us. Now you're going to have more opportunities to share with us and be more willing to do so. The next one down is risk and vulnerability assessments. I talked about that in the incident management spectrum. We do low-end cyber hygiene scanning. It's an external scan, 620-something partners. It started with a binding operational directive in 2015 where government departments and agencies were required to be scanned externally, and they were required to patch high and critical vulnerabilities within 30 days. But they weren't giving us the straight skinny on whether or not they were patched. So the Secretary and the NSC decided that we're going to tell them that they have to, and we have this authority in law to do that. Very similar to what DISA and Cyber Command can do in the military networks. You will, thou shalt. So we said you will be scanned and you will be fixing things within 30 days if they're critical and high. That's been very successful. Just to put a fine point on it, we are, I think we're engaged in 26 or 27 states, helping them look at their election infrastructure in this cyber hygiene and scanning effort. So, and I expect that over the next year or so to grow, because there's a big effort that we have going on right now to understand election systems, their vulnerabilities, and how we can help the state and local folks better protect those systems. Because as you all know, the election system is a state and local driven system, not a federal system. The next thing to talk about is data synthesis and analysis, and this goes back to what I talked about a little bit earlier. How do you take all this stuff that we have from the intelligence community and the law enforcement community, make sense of it, and then push it out rapidly so that cyber defenders have something they can sink their teeth into and do some really good work. We've had some pretty good success with that. Our analysts are really quite good. They're partnered with NSA, CIA, FBI, and anybody else you can think of in the federal government that's willing to share information. And so that the development of that analytic base is really important. It helps build what goes into the information sharing. One thing I will mention is that we are trying to get better at including the private sector in some of that information sharing effort. So I'll tell you that the group, the CEO at Palo Alto, a couple of years ago, kicked off a really altruistic sort of vision, which is we need to share. This is a team sport. And so what we're trying to do is build upon that. And is it failing? We're trying to build upon that and develop products that we can share with our private sector partners and have them turn it around rapidly. I feel like I'm a television. It's like, you ever watch a movie when the boom mic gets into the picture? That's what I feel like. Yeah. So how can we take a product that we have, share with a couple of trusted partners, and get their feedback on it in a real big hurry, so that whatever we push out is more effective and more useful? Because if you think about it, we're looking at a small piece of the pie. And if we have some trusted partners that are looking at a bigger part of the pie, we're going to have more value in the product that we push out. So we've tried that a couple of times on a limited basis and had really good success. A couple of months ago, we pushed out a product that we were going to generate, and we got feedback within an hour from one of the bigs that said, this is wrong. You need to fix this. I would change this Yara rule a little bit here because we are doing that and we're getting a bunch of false positives. And so the product that we ended up pushing out at the end of the day was significantly better than it would have been if we'd have just pushed it without bouncing it off of our partners. And so we're trying to develop that program a little bit more to get more out of it. We run a 24/7 watch. The watch floor is in Arlington on Glebe Road, but we have a rollover site at Corey Station in Pensacola, and a tertiary site. If we have to, we can go to Idaho Falls and run operations, although it's sort of difficult to get there sometimes. But the 24/7 Ops Center is more than just a duty officer. It's an interagency watch floor, and the idea on that watch floor is to create shared awareness. So we have FBI, Secret Service, Treasury, Energy, Aviation ISAC, Multi-State ISAC, Energy ISAC, a whole bunch of partners on that watch floor, so that when things are going down, there's a lot of discussion that happens on the watch floor before anything gets outside of the NKIC in terms of information sharing. So things that go out, responses that we're going to make, are going to be coordinated. And the watch is the primary site where we start the coordination of an incident as it's occurring. So think about WannaCry, for example. It's probably one of the easiest to talk about because most of them is unclassified. When that started happening, we had a 7 o'clock phone call with the National Cybersecurity Center in London. And they said, hey, this is going on, and by the way, here's a couple of news reports about what we're seeing. That dialogue continued through the day. What they were seeing in their healthcare sector got filtered to us, and by the time our government, the bigs in our government, started recognizing that there was an issue, we already had a full package of understanding of what was happening. That's very, very useful. The next step was, and again, coordinated by this watch floor, was outreach to departments and agencies, and particularly the healthcare sector, because as you know, in the UK, the National Health Service got hammered by WannaCry. So a regular cadence of phone calls, conference calls, information sharing was happening in real time based upon the way the watch floor was coordinated at that event. So we're pretty proud of the way that went down. It worked out pretty well. And then lastly, I mentioned the hunt and incident response. So this is a team that's modeled sort of on the red-blue concept that they have at NSA, and these are some pretty good hackers. They understand how to hack. They understand how the hacker works, and so when an incident is occurring, they can go out and respond to that incident from that hacker mindset. And so that is essentially what the NKIC does in total. There's a lot of other bits and pieces that go along with it. But I want to emphasize again the big muscle movers: information sharing, analysis, and incident management, and they're all inextricably tied together. I realize this is an eye chart. This is sort of a description of what happens in the NKIC on a daily basis. Just to give you an idea, this is a busy place. So 117 incident reports every day. We take in almost a terabyte of data through the Einstein system and analyze that data and are helping support department and agency defense efforts because of Einstein. And when CDM kicks in and we start seeing data from CDM, the number is going to go up by an order of magnitude. With Einstein, we detect about 360 vulnerabilities every day, either Einstein or cyber hygiene scanning. We know what's going on. We can take a look at it. We can see it. We can call partners and say, hey, are you seeing this? And then the Einstein system also has an alerting function, which is part of the equation. So I think we'll be able to give you the slides if you want them after the fact. So if you want to see that in more detail, and you can go to our website. This slide in more detail as well is up there, and we keep it updated. So information sharing, as I said, is our number one mission, and it involves a couple of things that are really important to remember. It's a team sport. It has to be all of us. It can't just be these guys or those guys. It has to be a combination of everything put together. It has to be open and transparent. You have to trust me. I have to trust you. By the way, if you share information with me, it's still your information. And I will protect it at the level that you want it to be protected at. So if you don't want me to share it anywhere, but you're going to give it to us for the benefit of what we're doing in terms of response, that's great. And we won't share it. If you don't mind us sharing it, we'll turn it into an anonymized product and make sure that it gets shared as far and wide as we can make it go. And that's a part of the trust relationship. I talked about the accuracy and the timeliness of information sharing. To us, it's critical. It's got to be fast, it's got to be accurate, and it's got to be unclassified. If I have a bunch of classified stuff, I can't share it with 90% of the people that we are partnered with. You just can't. And even when we can, we can't always share all the context that goes along with an indicator, for example. And so we're trying to get better at how do we get that down to a level that's understandable and usable. So I talked a little bit about WannaCry, and this highlights a couple of things. I mentioned in WannaCry earlier, we got notice of it at about 7 o'clock in the morning from the UK. There is a process in government now called the National Cyber Incident Response Plan. When WannaCry started happening, we evaluated what we saw happening against the National Severity Schema. We scored it as yellow, I think. And yellow means, okay, so we're going to go to enhanced coordination procedures. And a part of those enhanced coordination procedures were all those phone calls and those coordination cadence calls that I talked about. It was understanding who's in the mix and what can we do to support them. And that included the private sector. So if you think about the National Cyber Incident Response Plan, the next level up from enhanced coordination procedures is Unified Coordination Group, and that's a formal information sharing body. And we didn't think it needed to go there, and thankfully it didn't, because it caused that causes a lot of people to do a lot of extra work that, in our view, was unnecessary. So we worked at enhanced coordination procedures, but it included the private sector. The private sector was intimately involved in twice daily cadence calls with, this is what's happening now, this is what we're doing about it, what are you seeing, help us understand what the impacts are on your end of things.
Sir?
Yes?
Just using that vignette, what was the timeliness of the mitigation efforts you identified here when you sent out the technical alert and your malware initial findings report?
Yeah, so the technical alert went out within the first 4 hours. So the technical alert is a quick hitter. It's, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what we think you can do about it. The malware initial findings report came out the next day, which was a chop up of the malware in more detail. And then I think a month later we had a chance to chew on it for a little bit, understand it a little bit more. But one of the objectives is getting things out fast, and we're trying not to operate like the intelligence community, right? We're trying not to think these things direct. I'm happy to go with a 70% solution. If we got something that's we think is worth cyber defender's time and effort, we're going to push it. And it'll always have a caveat on there. Say, hey, look, this is just happening. It's an hour old. There's going to be more to follow. But we want to get something to you so you can start thinking about it, if not taking action.
So on big events like this, you're down to hours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In this case, it was less than hours. So we had our first calls around 7 in the morning, and we had a conference call with HHS and the internet service providers in the first hour, and we can stir those up pretty quickly. And the reason we went to internet service providers was simple, because we understood the threat vector to be. So the reason that the U.S. didn't get hit as hard as Europe did is because the big ISPs here automatically blocked port 443. In Europe, Telefonica, the Spanish internet service provider, which is pretty ubiquitous, it's an option. So in a lot of cases, it wasn't blocked, and as a result, there was more propagation. Did that answer your question? Yeah. And so Petya was a little bit different. It started off to be what we thought was a ransomware. That ended up not being really ransomware. It was a wiper. The interesting thing about Petya, and this got the attention of the maritime sector, one of the biggest players that was impacted in this country was a shipping company, a multinational shipping company that also has U.S. flag ships. That got their attention. And not only did it get their attention, it got other shipping interest attention. So there's now, since the time of Petya, there is now more of an effort for the maritime sector in this country in particular, but worldwide, to understand cyber and understand that cyber is a part of their everyday business. It's interesting because it has really thin profit margins. And so how do you integrate cyber thinking into something where profit margins are pennies? And it's not an easy answer. And so just like any cyber decision, this is driven by business. And it's driven by cost. And so there's a risk balance that has to occur. Unfortunately, Petya has helped facilitate some of that discussion. So to recap, I don't have a recap slide. I didn't do my Dale Carnegie work on this one. But what we talked about was what the NKIC is, what we do, and sort of how we do it. And I'm happy to take any sort of questions that you might have. And if I can answer them, I will. If I can't, I'll get you somebody who can. Yes, sir.
Great seeing you, sir. The last slide that you had, you have to go back to it. You start talking about shipping and so forth. That whole maritime domain awareness, right? Even as a vertical business line, intelligence aspect of it, managing and identifying ships and cargo and so forth. You know, that's just one, I guess, one aspect. There's other aspects of financial information as it relates to, say, commercial partners, right? That are you seeing, or do you expect the morphing, you know, of the NKIC to? You're going to get not just more data, but different types of data, different disciplines. It all intersect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So the question is, what are we going to do with all this other data that we get in if we're successful in generating good relationships? And the answer is we do it already. So I didn't talk in detail about some of the data that we get, but we have relationships with the ISACs in all 16 critical infrastructure sectors. We have partnerships with 200, and I think the latest count was 70 commercial concerns of all flavors, everything from the electric grid to oil and gas pipelines to gas liquefaction plants to the financial sector to electricity generation to healthcare. And so we have the beginnings of relationships with all those sectors, and we're starting to see more trust from them in that they're sharing more information with us. And you'd be surprised that although there is difference in the data because it's coming from this sector or that, so for example, oil and gas, a lot of the information, a lot of their concerns are around control systems. And so control systems that are particularly operated by a business system. You run a pipeline with a cell phone. transfer stations in the middle of South Dakota. You don't have somebody drive out there every day because it's not cost effective. What you do is you operate it by cell tower or by Wi-Fi. And so they're starting to understand the connections between the two. We're starting to see similar things in all sectors, across the sectors. Obviously, each sector has areas of special interest. The healthcare sector are really worried about privacy and HIPAA and all the things that are related to medical records. But I was in Louisville yesterday talking to some folks at Humana. They have the same problems that everybody has. How do we protect our data, and how do we make sure that we're in compliance with the regulations and things like that, so that we can effectively do our job and still, by the way, make a buck, because it's about business. And that's one of the big things that they're focused on now is, all right, we've got all this cyber stuff. You can block things 3 ways to Sunday, but if you do, how do you impact the business? And in our case, how do you impact mission? Right? And the DoD guys appreciate that. If you lock everything down, how are you going to fight a war? You're not. So you got to understand what the risks are and be able to make those balances before you go and take a particular action.
Thanks.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Could you just quickly maybe walk us through just an example, pick one up of like what the call sounds like? When you get a call from a partner saying, "Hey, I got this really big problem," and then when they say, "I'm willing to share that with you, but I don't want to share it more broadly because," what are those things you're dealing with?
Yeah, so the first thing that we'll do is we will put them in touch with one of our subject matter experts, and the dialogue on a technical level could go anywhere. The most important thing that we tell them is 2 things. Firstly, at what level are you comfortable sharing it? And we have a traffic light protocol. So red means we don't share. Yellow, amber means we will share, but only in a trusted community. White and green means it's shared more broadly and to a wider audience. And so we have that discussion with them. In some cases, they are also allowed to take advantage of a provision in the law called Protected Critical Infrastructure Information. So if they want to do that, they have to apply for it. There's an office, another part of DHS manages the approvals for that. But once they have that approval, they are not discoverable in court. They are not FOIable. And they are protected in a lot of ways from what the information is that they've shared with us. If they choose not to go that route, they are still protected and indemnified by the CISA 2015 legislation, which says if you share with DHS, your information is going to be protected, and anything that we pass out from what we've taken in is always passed out anonymously. So when we get your stuff in, we're going to anonymize it, and nobody's going to know that it's you. In a lot of cases, we can mix it up with other stuff that's going on, too, so it's really hard to understand where it came from. So, thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.